All right, I think we're live.
We are. Yep, we're
All
live.
right. I'm Adrian Park. With me today, our founder, Jay Carter. And yeah, I think this is gonna be an interesting one. So um I'm not sure if you saw last week, but anybody who um has played, likes, watches college football, there was some crazy, crazy stuff that happened last Saturday at 12 o'clock noon down in Texas. And that was the Colorado Buffaloes and the TCU Horned Frogs played, and the Colorado Buffaloes shocked the world. So unless you've been living under a rock this week, which some of us have, and no judgment there, um, like on literally, like when I was scrolling TikTok this week, every other post was Deion Sanders or one of his players on a podcast or on, like it was, and highlights of the game. And the reason why it was such a big deal, why is it a big deal? Well, it's a big deal for a couple of reasons. So for those who are going, what's this guy talking about? So of course, we all know Deion Sanders, who was number 21, played both professional football here in the States, and he also played professional baseball. And he didn't just play those sports, he was one of the best baseball players at the time. And he's a Hall of Fame football player. And I would put him in the top 10, top 25, depending on what you're ranking guys. He played both ways, which nobody does in the NFL. So he played both cornerback, and then when he went to the Dallas Cowboys, he played wide receiver and cornerback. Again, nobody plays both sides of the ball. That's unheard of. And so 20 years later, he's coaching college football for a tiny school no one's ever heard of called Jackson State down in Mississippi. And they crush over the last 2 years. And then on this offseason, he takes the job as the head coach of the Colorado Buffaloes in Boulder, Colorado. And so just really quickly. So with Jackson State, there are like videos on YouTube of a Hall of Fame cornerback, one of the best of all time at the position, who bought a riding lawnmower at Jackson State to mow their practice field so the boys could practice. That
Wow.
is Deion's level of intensity and level of commitment. All right. And in the middle of these 2 years of absolutely dominating, right? Dominating their conference, he also had surgery to remove, like he had parts of his feet amputated, and still
Jesus.
came and showed up and crushed. Okay, so he gets a job with the Buffaloes. So in the offseason for the last 6 months, everybody's like, they just get so distracted because Deion talks a lot, right? And so I was watching the pregame on CBS last week, and Urban Meyer, who coached for University of Florida, won two almost three national championships there, and then one at Ohio State. He's a college football legend in the States. So he's on there and he's a commentator or whatever. And he's like, if they have a banner year, they'll do 500. And everybody, and if you can go on social media right now, everybody's been talking, just like, there's no way it's going to be a learning year, blah, 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 blah. Well, here's what happened. So Shedeur Sanders, who is Deion's son, he's the quarterback, threw for a record 510 yards. School record. All right. He threw for 4 touchdowns, tying the school record. And they had 458 total yards of offense, the most in school history. Right. So they total offense, Shedeur, the quarterback. I mean, they literally broke records in the very first game that Deion is coaching. Right. And then he's got this kid named Travis Hunter, who's now considered to be one of the best players in all of college football after this last week. And he's playing both sides of the ball. So he had 11 catches, 119 yards and a touchdown, 3 tackles, an interception, and played 129 snaps. Like literally played the whole game. So this is interesting because the Buffaloes were actually, can you let me share my screen? I forgot to,
Sure.
I forgot to, I had this up here. So the Buffaloes like shocked everyone, right? So then, so here's a couple things that people don't know, and you'll love this, Jay. So let me see if I can expand this. So there we go. So Dion, one of the terms of his deal is that he has basically final say on all merch, on all equipment.
Oh, wow.
And so like of course he's using school colors, but he's selecting what he and his coaching staff wear, what the players wear, the jerseys, like he did a deal with Nike. I mean, so he's not just, I mean, obviously for the functional purpose of, in terms of the jerseys and helmets, he wants them to be in the best stuff, right? But also Dion's a marketer, right?
Yeah.
So Dion wants the men to, like, he has a big belief that like part of playing good is also looking good. Now, people would disagree with that, and we're not going to get into a debate about that, but you know, that's part of his belief system. And so he did that deal. And so he has basically final say on all of like merch, equipment, like how it, like what they use, how it looks, obviously within the guidelines of the rules and regs, but like he's got final say. Here's another thing people don't know. The athletic director had so much conviction. This is him. This picture is right after the game. And I remember seeing this going, what white dude is he hugging? This is the athletic director for Colorado who wanted Dion so much. He basically put together a campaign to raise $28 million to get Dion. Dion signed the deal in faith that he was going to be able to get the money to support the program that Dion wanted to run. And this is them hugging after they beat TCU on Saturday. So here's a couple things. Okay. So today we're talking about strategy and implementation with sales funnels, but like, you know, the thing that people get distracted by with Deion Sanders is he talks a lot. But that distracts them from the fact that he is all about the work. When he they take a lot of video. They put, you know, you can go and find literally hours of video of him talking to his team on YouTube and really on every social platform right now. And he's about speed, toughness, and discipline. And here's the thing. Okay, so now this is just one game, so I'm not going to build a whole like doctrine around one game, but I expect that we'll see I expect they're going to win a lot this year. And here's the thing, like, especially like a sport that's very physical, like football, like talent is not enough, right? It is not enough just to be like good at something and to know what to do. You have to execute, right? And that's why the reason they won is that these guys work their asses off in practice. Like it's all about work. And here's a couple quotes. Discipline and success are synonymous. A real dream requires hard work. That's his belief, right? If you have a dream, that's great, but you have to work hard, right? And you have to sacrifice something you care about. So, you know, today I was, you know, obviously you can tell I'm a little bit excited about this because one, I grew up watching Deion Sanders as a kid. You know, he's the best cornerback ever. I mean, this guy was amazing. I mean, he's probably, him and one other guy are like top two in the all of, you know, NFL history. But like, this guy works. Like, he is about the work. And like, he goes into these meetings, Jay, if you like watch one of their team meetings on YouTube, and he's got these guys, they're like the military. Like, he goes in there, he's like, good morning. And they chant back, good morning, good morning, good morning, good morning, good morning. And it is like, if you hear him talk and you stop there, you hear Deion, like, because he's very, very, very good with his words, and he is not shy about like, we're going to win, right? He's like, we want to win a national championship this year. Why not? Why can't I win a championship this year? And people they stop there and they get all wrapped around the axle on that, and they forget that they are doing the work. It's the work. Like, strategy and talent are great, right? We must have some of both of those. But if we don't do the work, if we don't execute, that's kind of where things break down, right?
Mhm.
And think about, like, when I was early in my banker career, which was just a fancy, is a fancy term for a salesperson, right? Selling bank products. We had this thing that the managers would talk about, call reluctance. And I think that, like, as entrepreneurs and as, like, as business owners, contractors, our call reluctance is that we think about, like, how we're going to do it. And we try to get the right way and going for perfection, or, like, trying to improve this thing. And then we don't actually get to work on it. Right. We don't do the work. We don't execute. And it's not, I mean, it's not just contractors, not just shitting on contract. I mean, it's all business people, but, like, that's where things break down so often, right? But that is, at the end of the day, there is not a solution out there that doesn't involve execution, which is a fancy way of saying work, right?
Mhm. Now, I mean, that's an interesting point, and I have to jump in on this one. So, one of the observations that I make regularly, is I think contractors overall, like, they work, man, but they have an unhealthy relationship to hard work. They figure that everything should be hard, right? And I think they talk themselves out of a lot of opportunities or chances to, move forward, um, based on that. Again, and I know it goes kind of against what we as contractors kind of believe we're trying to do, right? So I want to give you a really clear example of what I'm talking about.
Okay.
Today I had a call with a gentleman. He's actually calling about our hiring system at first, and I'm on the call with him, and we get talking and chatting about his business, and he shares with me all the things that he's tried in marketing. And this is a typical conversation. He wraps off about 10 or 12 things, and he started with Google Ads, and Google Ads screwed him, and he did this and that screwed him. I'm like, oh, okay. And he's like, well, at the one time when things were working, he's like, I had all these guys and blah. I'm like, so what stopped? He's like, well, I stopped. I was losing money doing Facebook ads and Google ads, and I said, tell me, like, were you doing all of these things at the same time? He's like, yeah. And I'm like, and you quit them all at the same time, right? It's like, yeah. And I'm like, well, what drove that? He's like, well, I was so stressed out from all the running around and everything else. It's like, huh. I'm like, did you think that at any point that was a good strategy? And he kind of paused, and he said, strategy. He's like, I just needed to get jobs. And we both kind of caught it. And, like, I'm looking at him, and I gave it enough time to just make it awkward.
Right.
Right? And I'm like, do you think if you had a strategy, maybe those things would have succeeded? And he's like, well, what do you mean? I just need to get jobs. And I said, well, no, because you had jobs. You didn't have the right jobs, though. I'm like, you didn't have the right guys.
Right.
Because you didn't really know what it was that you were doing. And it's not just getting jobs. If getting jobs was your only objective, I mean, you can go work for your competitor, right? May as well go be a subcon. That's a job, right? And I mean, he's going to pay you fractionally less than what you're going to get, and you can avoid working for anybody. The difference here is number one is, I think a lot of contractors get themselves into the situation of, I'm going to just start panicking. I'm going to respond or react to not having work, or I'm going to respond to react to not having guys, or whatever. I mean, again, I see the pattern over and over again. And then they start to guess at what the solution to the problem is and hope that it's going to get resolved. And I see it over and over and over again, when the answer to these things is a lot simpler than the reaction that they're taking. So, for example, again, he shared with me he'd spent $20,000 in under 3 months, and him and his partner, like, this went really bad, right? Like, him and his partner broke up, and, like, all this, terrible things that came from it. And I was like, just like, help me understand. I'm like, at what point were you good? And then at what point were you bad? And he's like, well, and he starts to explain his intent. I'm like, no. Like, I get your intent, and we all have the same intent. We all want at one point or another to get bigger, and we know why we're doing it. right? We want to provide for a family, we want to have freedom, we want to have things. But at what point did it cross your mind that just getting jobs would get you there? And that's where you see the breakdown in strategy. That's where you see the breakdown in understanding that it's not just getting jobs. There's so much more. And here's the thing. If you start changing big things all at once, all right, plan to fail. Okay. And
Right.
I'll just tell you, I've learned this the hard way over and over. I'm still, again, I just recently in Pro Hire AI, I made the same mistake again and started moving things too quickly before I let them take their, their proper training. And
Right.
I reminded myself and stopped and slowed down and was like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Okay, let's get back to my fundamentals that I know to be true. If I want to fix my sales, if I want to fix my marketing, okay, yes, you do need a good strategy, but your strategy, okay, let's keep it simple. Strategies aren't supposed to be complicated.
Right.
Okay, they're supposed to be
Right.
clear, concise, time bound, and they have to start with a start and a stop. Okay,
Right.
if you can't formulate a strategy that makes sense, okay, and again, if you can't tell it to a perfect stranger and have them make sense of it, don't
Understand. Right.
follow through. So
Right.
here's a good example of this. All right, let's go back to the I just needed jobs. I'm like,
Right.
okay, great. So you went with, Google Ads leads, agency. That's great. Okay. And what were they going to do for you? Oh, I don't know. Like, oh, I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, okay. I'm like, so like, how did you pay them? He's like, well, no, I like they for $2,500, and then they just wanted to up my spend. I'm like, okay, so you blindly gave a
Right.
stranger $5,000 of your money and you didn't give an expectation of what you wanted? Like how many? He's like,
Right.
well, he's like, I just needed to fill my calendar, my schedule. I'm like, so you didn't care what the hell they like put in that
Right.
schedule or calendar.
Right. Right.
It never crossed your mind to think that this could make me very busy, but could possibly also make me very poor, right? Like if you don't bring in the right leads, it doesn't matter. Like if you are like, and I can go find you a bunch of traffic leads that are shopping for prices and just like they're banging on the doors of everyone, like every other lead seller out in the market is doing, right? I can bring those to you. Or again, a strategy is what we've been talking about with these funnels and how we build a connection between people that are just beginning the process all the
Right.
way up to, where they're making decisions. And that's where you're actually adding the value of your offer. That's where you're getting the opportunity. That's a strategy. Okay. That's a strategy. And where's it start? It starts at the top of the funnel. Where's it end? When you convert them at the bottom of the funnel,
Right.
right? How
Right.
do we do it? Like again, we're going to engage earlier. We're going to provide this kind of value at this point and do this thing at this point. But here's the problem that to most people that's a logical, like they can see that being a good strategy. But when it comes time to execute these things, this is where the wheels pop off, right? Is that we tend to, most contractors, be very impatient and not be
Right.
willing to take 3 months to
Right.
have a problem you've been suffering with for 20 years be solved.
Right.
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 So,
Yeah.
and again, that was one of the other points I forgot to mention. When I had asked him how long he had been a contractor, oh, he was very proud, 20 years. And, I asked him how much time he spent on his tools. He was very proud of that too. He's like, maybe just once or twice a week, that's it. And I was like, what's the end game? What's the goal line? Like, he's like, well, I'm getting close to retiring. I want to give the business to my son. And I was like, okay. And as we got towards the, kind of the aha moment that, comes sometimes on these calls, sometimes not, because, you're always dealing with different types of characters. I asked him again, I'm like, coming back to where we started, I'm like, you just needed to get jobs. I'm like, after we've had we got really kind of personal and involved with just how big of a mistake. And he started to realize, very quickly how that was never going to work out. You
Right.
can't just move big, but you can't muscle your way in on this because even if they brought all those leads to you, you had no systems to manage them. You had no process to close them. You had
Right.
no, like these strategies, these systems, these things, they have to be tested, right?
Right.
So my conclusion with him is, if we were to go back and be able to redo this, if I could click my fingers and take you right back to the point that you made that decision, right? And again, he had, borrowed money and all this other stuff he had shared with me. It was a very intimate conversation. And again, I felt like he was being very, genuine and open, and I really appreciated it. But, he had shared with me that, like, he had to do it now. And I'm like, why now? What's causing you to, think this way? Right? Why, like, after, again, you've been doing this for 20 years, just chugging along, doing your thing and what you have you. And he's, he finally kind of shared with me that, he's watching other younger contractors that he trained all of a sudden are blowing up, and, they're getting all the jobs and he's not
Right.
able to. So he feels like, something has to give, and it must be just because,
Right.
they could get jobs and he couldn't. So he wanted to, again, kind of regain some dignity he had lost with that. And in the process, actually managed to almost bankrupt the company in 3 months. So,
Jeez.
when we talked about it and we finally got to that point in the conversation, something shifted, and, he finally kind of repeated back to me what I was looking for, the whole time is, understanding that a strategy is only as good as the outcome that it's supposed to get you, right?
Right.
So if your outcome was to be, the biggest, the baddest, the most busiest, great strategy, right? If you wanted pure chaos unleashed on your world, great strategy. If you wanted to fail miserably, excellent. Could not, like, textbook. Okay. But I wonder again, how many contractors are honestly putting themselves in these positions consistently over and over again, and they're misunderstanding that reaction, okay, is not the strategy. It's not the
Right.
solution, right? And we get into these reactive things. We do these panic things. We drop our prices. We do all types of things that, and again, when you really start to unwind it and look at it very carefully, it's a behavior pattern. Okay, it's a pattern that somebody has followed for a long time, and it's their reaction to something happening. All right, and it also usually is related to how much patience they have. All right, so again, I come back to this, this very vivid point that I had, with in the conversation with him, and understanding his motivation of why, like, why now, like, why was this important? Why did it have to be so quick? Why did it have to be like
Right.
stacked on top? And, I finally get to, well, he's watching other people, do a lot better, that he trained, and feels, that he was losing his time. And, you know, we finally got to this really important moment where I was like, if we took in one of those, lead strategies, okay, and it took you 3 months and it only generated 3 leads a week, let's say, on the worst case, 1 lead a week, but
Right.
you had it working perfectly and you knew the exact return on your investment and you could predict that happening. I'm like, where would you be now? He's like, well, well, I'm like, now, I mean, if we had really thought through this and we actually thought about using it to get more money for the same amount of work,
Right.
right? And we really opened our eyes to what this is outcome needed to look like, all right, for it to make sense. I'm like, how many of those leads you did get could have been for more money, right? And therefore would have had to do far less, cover your costs, but thinking about doing less instead of more, right?
Right.
At what point though did we get caught up in getting, assuming bigger and, more leads, more work, I just need work, is going to get you to out of the situation you're in, out of that scarce mindset that you're in, right?
Right.
That, like, just because even if you acquire the jobs, you're still not capable of managing the strategy of making those profitable,
Right.
right? So, again, I think, the silver lining in this, the point that I'm trying to suggest to all contractors that are listening, and again, some of you guys have great strategies, some of you guys have great, ideas, and ideas are not strategies, by the way, just to be clear. All right, they're not, they're great ideas, but they're nothing
Right.
real until they're written down, until they're out of your head and shared with someone else who understands. That's not a strategy. That's
Right.
you making goals in your head. Okay, and we all have those. Okay, they're also dreams, and we know how quickly dreams can go out the door too. Okay, so let's not live on hopes and dreams. a strategy goes with a plan. It goes with execution. It goes with, a lot of the things that you started off our conversation on, and understanding first and foremost that nothing happens overnight, and
Right.
getting one thing right, testing it, making sure it's delivering results, and then moving on to the next thing. And again, when we look at guys that are really struggling, right, particularly in areas that they're not experienced. So again, I'm not, they're not struggling with the strategy of how to do the job, right? They figured that long ago.
Right.
And again, that's not their issue. Their strategy is usually around areas that they're not familiar with or don't know how to do, and that's where the problems start. That's
Right.
where the resistance to change and that feeling of not knowing, right? And I think the change takes over in these situations. And I don't know if maybe some of the contractors out there are feeling that, but they've got these great opportunities. Oh, I've got all of this work now, but then they completely they almost self-sabotage themselves in not getting that right help in place, not getting the right people in place, not following their strategy to the end, or getting early success is the worst. See it all the time in marketing. They start off with a big push. All of a sudden they're getting results, and then boom, they stop, or they do something self-sabotaging, like taking away ad spend. When things get things get hard, they drop their marketing dollars. So you just got to kind of come back to a basic I think center point in all of this, and start to think about not biting off the whole thing, and taking small measurable bites that get you success, but it's long term. That's what I use strategy for.
Well, I think that too, like you said something that I want to go back to, and that's, two things actually. One, it is, this is, and we talked about this in either last week or the week before. I mean, let's be honest, like we're not great marketers as contractors, right? This is not, if we were, we wouldn't be contractors, right? I mean, we'd be marketers. So, so there's that. So I think that, and you just said a minute ago, like we are hesitant to do things we don't know,
right?
Because and it's just a human thing, and it's okay, because our brains are are here to, not to make us happy or fulfilled, but to keep us alive, right? So it's a survival mechanism, and part of survival is not doing things you don't know, like what's you don't know, you don't have a good idea of what the outcome is going to be. And if you don't have a good idea what the outcome is going to be, that's dangerous, right? So in a world where we don't have all this developed civilization around us, and we're in caves, and there's saber-toothed tigers, and animals that want to eat us, like, you don't do things you don't know. Like, you don't go somewhere you haven't gone before. You stay in your little area and you defend your little area. Well, and that's kind of, I think, what we do as contractors with marketing. We don't really understand it. So we're like, and so then we do what your guy did, and we try something because someone's convinced us it would work, and it doesn't work right away, or it doesn't work at all. And we're just like, well, that's, and we just like, we wrap marketing up in this big, like, we put it all into this one, like this, we give it this, it's all bad. It all doesn't work. I'm going to go back to what I know. And it's not, again, I'm not shitting on anybody. Like, that's a human response. But the thing that we have to remember about work and execution is that part of what makes that so critical is like the next step, like taking failure, picking it apart, and like remembering that failures are, have the most valuable information of anything we do, right? Because it's telling us all these things that aren't working. So, so let's maybe we can pivot a little bit to, so with sales, with funnels, right? We've been talking about funnels for a few weeks now. So let's talk about strategy and execution, or implementation. Like, what does that look like? So we're talking about kind of a high level. Let's bring it down to someone wants to use a funnel to get more customers, to get the right customers. So what does it look like for them?
So first step, let's just do a step by step. I mean, if we're going to take control of our marketing, let's just say that our goal is to get more jobs. Okay. Our target's
Okay.
to get more jobs.
Sure.
Let's start off by asking the right questions. Okay.
Okay.
How many jobs? Exactly. How many jobs do I need? Like, I don't want to do more than I need to do. All right.
Right.
And there's a
That's a good
reason
point.
for it. Okay.
Yeah.
Again, it's like guys that go to the gym when they're first starting, they go and they go push hard for 2 weeks and they do crazy
Right.
stuff. And then boom, they burn out and they're done. Right. Don't be
Right.
that guy. Okay.
Right.
I want you to think small, almost unnoticeable steps that you're going to take on a daily basis that you can move into your routine that are going to, yes, they're going to take a little longer. Okay. But they're sustainable. All right. And I can't stress this enough. So I want to get more jobs. Let's break that down to, I want to get one more job a month. Okay. And to a lot of people, they kind of, because we're not, as contractors, we're not built that way. We're not built to
Yeah.
just think minimalist. But when it comes
Right.
to marketing and getting more jobs, as you would say, more is not better. Okay.
Right.
And when you get things right and you find it's easy to scale up, when you
Right.
get things wrong, it's not easy to scale down. Okay. So where we want to start our process is understanding, first of all, what is the bare minimum for me to, succeed in what I'm trying to do. So if it's one job, let's focus on one job. Let's make that the hard target. Okay. Now we're going to add in, okay, what would get me that one job? And for most of us, again, guys, we overthink, we overanalyze, we just don't do the right things at the right time to get that. For me, again, if I were going to go that route, I'm going to be honest with you. I'm going to buy a Facebook ad. I'm going to put that Facebook ad out. I'm going to make sure I'm speaking directly to the customer I know I do my best business with, and I'm going to make it so personal that nobody can confuse who I'm looking to do business with. Even if it's ugly, I don't give a shit. I only need to do one job. Okay.
Right.
So I'm going to look at that. And, the next thing I'm going to really evaluate is the mechanisms. Okay. So, let's say I put that Facebook ad out. All right. I'm going to know my cost. I'm going to have a stop loss in place right away.
Okay,
And
stop. You gotta stop. Hold on. Stop loss. Explain that real quick. Explain that.
So, and we're going to be talking about Facebook ads and all that stuff. So when we go into these things, a lot of times contractors go in blindly, and it's a method actually of marketing. So if I was an agency, I want to get as much money out of you as possible and do the least amount of work, right? And the way that ads works is basically it's almost like putting your money in I'm going to say a smart, very smart, what would we call it? They're at the casinos, a slot machine. Jesus.
Oh, yeah.
Right. So we're playing the
Okay.
slots. Okay. So we're putting in our money into the slot machine, but we have to know, all right, if we're going to be doing it ourselves, we have to be able to say, you know what? This is as much as I'm willing to spend. Okay. To acquire a single job. If I can't acquire it, and here's kind of how marketers think as well. All right. Anybody that sits there and says without a doubt that they know exactly how to go get you jobs tomorrow, blah, 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 and they know the marketing, and they're lying to you, period. End of story. Walk away. Okay. I wouldn't say it to you. Anyone said that to me, I would know they're full of shit and I wouldn't do business with them. The reality is every time, and the best marketers in the world would never claim that they know exactly what's going to work, because every offer is different. Every person's different, geographical areas. Like, there are so many factors that come into acquiring a job. Okay. So with that in mind, all right, let's say I set my goal that it's going to cost me $500 to acquire a customer. I set up my ads, I run it. Maybe I get 2, maybe I get 3, maybe I get 1. At that point though, I've given it enough time to test itself out. I've given it enough of an investment, decide if I'm happy with that return or not. And then I'm going to stick by my decision. Okay. So again, just like gambling, and that's why I'm using this stop loss term. All right. Is you've got to know when to say, you know what, I've got to get help. I've got to ask somebody for help, or you know what, this piece of marketing collateral didn't work out and I'm not going any further, because then it stops there. Okay. Rather than you getting ahead of yourself, building a funnel, launching a bunch of ads, then, hiring a sales team. And then when the problems come, and they will, all right, not knowing where to go and look at what's causing it. Okay. So if you think about this in a logical way, if I couldn't get a Facebook ad to work, right, I couldn't get a single one to work, Nobody wanted my service. That's a good place now to go back, reevaluate, and see if you are actually speaking to the customer or
Right.
you have an offer somebody actually wants.
Right.
Okay. If they don't,
Right.
great. We're going to tweak it. We're going to get it. But I'm going to get that one thing working first, right? I'm going to get it to maybe I want 4 customers for that $500. I want, I want to land 4 customers. That means I got to get
Right.
16 leads. That means, you know what I mean? So you've got to have those things clear up front. And again, now we're going to have what we call an isolated test. Okay. If it fails, you know exactly why it failed. Okay. Maybe it's, and again, we can get even, further into this, but it's going to be the ad, right? It's going to
Right.
be the copy. It's going to be this. It's good. Like there's no other thing that caused it to fail, right? Now, let's take it to the next level. So let's say we did fine for $500. We got a really good return on our ad spend. Great.
Mm-hmm.
Perfect. And it's sustainable. It's been tested over 4 weeks. The copy's resonating. You're getting the leads that you wanted at the price that you want. Great. Now I'm going to think about how am I going to use that and take it to the next level. Now I want to be able to provide quotes quick enough to do more work, to get more quotes out, right? Because
Right.
if I can scale this ad up, if I spent 1,000 and I get similar numbers, well, it's pretty easy to understand how we're gonna grow it from there,
2,000,
right?
3, 4. Right.
So the next thing you're going to find is it's going to become a situation of systems. All right. And always you can never go into it with the mindset of I'm losing money. All right. If you go in with that mindset and only looking at the money thing, you're gonna have a very, very hard time adjusting. All right.
Right.
The mindset that needs to be going in is like, I'm investing, first of all, in having an independent job acquiring system that
Yeah.
doesn't involve somebody guessing at or throwing things at the wall and hoping that they'll stick. Because hey, listen, you want me to gamble your money? Come, we'll go put it all on red, because that's what you're doing with these lead companies. I'm being honest, right?
Yeah.
Like that is what you're doing, and guys just don't realize it, that they're gambling. They don't know. They know fractionally more than you do. All right, as a
Right.
trades guy, that is the God honest truth. If anybody
Scary.
actually knew, they would have had these algorithms figured out, and they don't.
Right.
Nobody knows.
Right.
And it
Right.
can change just like that, right? So don't let anybody fool you into thinking that they have the answers. You actually have more answers than they do, because you know the client you're looking for.
Right.
You know the type of customer, you know their behaviors. You can observe things and you care, right? Here's the big thing. You care, right? So you have probably a better, overall ability to describe your customer. Now, if running the ad isn't your thing, you can hire people to do that, but get clear about
Right.
those things first.
Right.
Step 2 is systemize it. Get it at the lowest level before you scale it up. Make sure that it takes 0 of your time to bring in a lead. All right. Get a lead booked, get a lead, set up and scheduled. Now, obviously you have to go out and work on closing it, but don't go beyond that if you can't. If it's taking up your time, all right, and it's taking your investment and your energy and you're doing things manually, then that might be the place you stop. That might be just perfect for what you need. And you don't need to complicate anything. If you want to get more, then you're going to implement a system. All right. And again, it doesn't even have to be, if we're being honest, listen, contractors for, probably 100 years or 100 more years were able to do everything without computers. Right.
Right.
So, I mean, again, don't feel like the pressure of you need to use technology. No, you need to close. We got to get work, do work, and keep score. If you can do that without using a computer, go for it. All right.
Right.
Don't feel like a system has to be technology if that's not your gig. I mean, you can use anything, but have a system, have a way to repeat it, and have a way that somebody else can repeat it for you. Okay. If you get to that point and it's working for you, and you're happy and that's giving you, well, there we solved the problem. Right.
Right.
Don't go any further than that. You at that point you can stop. All right. And again, there's no problem with that. In fact, I encourage it, right? Make as much money as you possibly can for the least amount of time as possible. That is the ultimate outcome. Okay. But let's say you do want some more and you do want to scale and you want to have staff and you want to have employees. Focus on the process of doing that, having it outside of your hands. Okay. At a lower level, again, think of this as your investment, because you know you can go back to those ads and increase the spend, right?
Right.
But you can't get back your time,
Right.
right? And if you're losing your time on these things, you're gonna find out very quickly that it can get out of control. And again, opportunities lost. You're not optimizing your spends, all these kind of things, and building a funnel, despite all the information that's out there, is not easy. I assure you, it's little tiny things, like
Yeah.
even, I'll share today on our team call. What was it? We were trying to get our landing page to convert to 20%. We've been improving 2 and 3% week over week,
Right.
and we're doing small measurable things. We know exactly what we changed so that we can go back if it didn't work. Right.
Right.
So we're only staking that much. We only run it for the same period of time that we've tested other things until something works. Once it works, all right, we've solved the problem. We're going to move
Right.
to the next step. And the next step is to turn up the ads. Right now, we're going to turn up our ad spend. And again, we're doing it in balance. And now this is precisely why funnels were built.
Right.
That at each step, you can measure it. And each step follows the next. If you don't get the first step right, don't go to the second. You will fail. Like there's no doubt. If you can't get, the ROI or the return in the very first step, which is the ad, you have no business building any more of the funnel.
So I'm gonna take kind of some of the things you've said, Jay, and like put it together. So the strategy part is know who you're like, know what customer you're going for, right?
Correct.
And if you haven't yet defined that, get real clear about who you want to do business with and what's going to be profitable for you and what you can do, right?
Yep.
And then know how many of those customers you want, right? And then decide how much you can spend on like to get started, to figure out what it's going to cost you to get those customers, and then evaluate as you're spending, instead of just like throwing 5, 10, 15, 20, 25,000 at something, you doing the funnel slot machine. Like evaluate as you're going through. That's where strategy implementation kind of like find each other and evaluate how well it's working, and then make changes as you get feedback that, like this isn't working, that's not working, this is working, and figure out how you can like do it more like on like a lather, rinse, repeat.
Right.
Am I getting that correct?
Yeah. The only thing that I would say is keep it isolated, right? If you're like, again, good strategies work because they're easy to understand. All right. So why I'm trying to keep you, it's easy to go and look at the big problem, and I need jobs now. So then we start to build things ahead of time. We start to build, like I said, the CRM, all this other stuff. We start to anticipate before we even have one thing working. And then what happens is we've added all these things, and we have no way to know which part of this is not. These are complicated, even in the simplest form. They're complicated.
Yes,
one small thing can completely change the outcome of a funnel. Okay. One statement, one piece of copy. We've talked about this the last few weeks, but now we're talking about the strategy of actually putting this together. And the strategy needs to be is isolate and always be looking at your variables. The more variables you have played on the table, all right, the more chances you have to fail. So as you isolate these variables and you test them against control, right? So control is, hey, we know funnels works, right? We know that, people can generate leads from, Facebook ads, all right? We get the copy to work. We get that working first, okay? The message is working. And then we are going to talk about that in depth in the other one. And then we're going to move on to the next piece, but we're not going to skip the steps. And we're going to be patient enough to realize that we're investing in something that's going to potentially make us millions. A right funnel can last for, and how many of them out there that have lasted for decades, right?
That's a good
Because
point.
the message is universal. It doesn't change. Same with your contracting business. If you offer a great service to a high-end premium client and you provide all those things, well, this is just your message to the world for people to, engage in your service. But if you miss on any of those things and that message isn't being communicated properly, all right, and you've already gone ahead and started sales process, started marketing before you got these things right, by the time you figure it out, you've got to go back and rebuild everything, because
Right.
one thing leads, if the message that went out to the customer in the first place attracted you a low end tire kicker, okay, and you set yourself up to sell to a high end, Lamborghini type owner, and all of your stuff up to that point before you tested the first thing is like, is this customer fit my offer? All right, you
Right.
failed. It's over. Like,
Right.
that's it. And all you're going to do at that point is react and try to throw things to figure out where the problem is. You'll never get a grip on it. So again, anybody attempting to do this on their own or working with someone, get that part done first, right? Make sure it's clear and make sure you have a way of testing each part of it, and be patient, enjoy the journey. Understand you are going to fail building a funnel 100%. Okay. Now, and I mean this in the best way, but it's easier to fail in small,
Yeah.
controlled,
Right.
tests, and where you're not, the failure is actually to your benefit, because once you've gotten rid of that, you're not using all of the costs that you would as running a campaign on full tilt, right?
Right.
$500 can get your message, everything, all of that tested. You're going to know exactly what works, exactly what's going to resonate. Now we're going to, go to the next step, which is building the funnel out, building the landing pages out. And that's the same process, right?
And I think I want to just go back there real quick. $500. Say that again. $500. Say that again.
Yeah,
I want people to hear
$500.
that.
So $500 is what it would require for you to test out everything in your funnel.
Right.
Right.
Because
if I was using ads and I was using the population, and I don't want to give away too much because next week we're going to talk about this, but most guys don't realize is that these algorithms, so Facebook and like all these marketing algorithms, they will tell you what your market wants. They will tell you what what hungry crowd is there and what they're looking to eat. Okay. If you know how to use it to that benefit. And again, this is kind of the secret stuff behind most marketers. What nobody understands is that they're not coming up with this stuff, guys. When a funnel takes off and works really well, yes, there are some great copyrights out there, but I guarantee you nobody that you're in contact with, or you or me are even in contact with, is one of those people. Okay. There is fundamental things that you can test in your messaging that align with the value of your offer. Okay. For no money, zero, really $500, to make sure that everything's going to work as you start to launch out your funnels.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And I think, again, that's, like you were talking to this guy that spent 20 grand.
Yeah, just like that.
And like I said, I remember, I've said this before, but it bears repeating. I mean, I remember the cheapest package that we looked at was like $1,500-$1,600 a month.
Yep.
And I was like, and the reason I didn't do it is that when I asked them about, like, this is who our customer is, can you tell me with certainty that these are the leads we're going to bring in, right? And they, of course, they, it was like just glazed over, So, so I mean, again, I think that's so important. You can test everything. With $500. You don't have to spend $5 grand or $1,500 right away. I mean, you want to spend because you want to scale.
Absolutely, and that should always be your goal, is to spend. The guy who can afford to spend the most on acquiring a customer wins.
The guy wins, period. Full, yeah.
Right. So if you keep that in mind, your goal is to spend the most amount of money in these places. All right. But here's the rub. Okay. Here's the reality. If you don't get the things right, all right, if you don't know your customer, don't expect anyone else to know that for you.
Right.
That's right. If your only objective is to get jobs, go get jobs then. You're going to overpay for your marketing, and you're not going to be able to spend the most to acquire the customer. Right. And therefore, again, there's no way to scale or grow because you're actually giving your profits away. And that's why I think there's such a negative feeling and why guys don't really trust the marketing stuff
Yeah.
is because they don't understand
Right.
about it. So what we're going to be talking about, next week and over the next few weeks is how you don't need to be an expert marketer. Okay.
Right.
But we can do things. I can show you, and I'm going to, how to test your messaging, how to test things so that you can take that to a marketer and now hold them accountable to the results that you're expecting. All
Right.
right. So if you, again, and this is a good strategy, is that don't try to put on the hat of marketer and try to, spend the next 10 years learning how to do great marketing. That's not the objective here. The objective is to show you that there are things that you can do to give to a marketer that does great job, and to know who a great marketer is, and to have just as enough knowledge and to know your market perfectly that this can be handed off, so that when you need to get jobs, you're pulling a lever. You're
Just-
not putting your money on red.
Well, and I think too, Jay, and so I don't want to tell me if I'm speaking out of school here, but
Yeah.
I think the other side of this is that, because there just aren't that many contractors that are like really have like a good Facebook ads, Instagram ads, YouTube ads game. And so it seems to me like no matter where you are, outside of like a New York or a Toronto or a San Francisco, like a really big city,
Mhm.
which is not where most, that's some people, that's not everybody.
Right.
So outside of that, where it's a little more competitive, like if you're in anywhere but like a huge like top 5, top 10 city, like you have no competition. It's not like they're seeing
Absolutely.
10 contractors.
Right.
They're seeing one.
Right.
Right. And like I've noticed that here where I am,
Mhm.
because there's there's one roofing company.
Right.
And no one in the space I was in, no masonry restoration or masonry contractors, or no
Same in
plumbers,
some
no
of the areas. Yeah.
electricians. They're not they're not there. Right.
Right.
It's literally like, like it's what they call the blue ocean, right? There's no
Right.
sharks feeding. You're the only shark.
Right.
So like, I think that's the thing that like, you know what I mean?
Yeah. And again, but even in that situation, and I've, when I started my business, I started in a very rural area. We had a town of 300. It was all farms.
Wow.
Right. And I started a metal roofing company. People were like, you're absolutely not, like, what are you thinking? And I knew that, like, listen, I'm looking around at all these barns, all this steel that's going on. I don't see that much shingles. Like literally,
Right.
that's how, like, there weren't a lot of shingles, and they were, telling me I was crazy, but I knew something very, very important. And this is, kind of to help anybody that's listening to this really understand. I knew that there was, no matter what, enough money being spent in that area and not enough people servicing that to be competition.
Right.
So if I'm in a situation where there's no competition, that's a pretty desirable place. And I think most contractors put themselves inadvertently into competition by not
Right.
understanding this. They
Right.
compete, or they go get an Angie's List. They go get the things that are easy to
Right.
do, right? That they think are going to solve the problem, but they're not, right? Rather than, again, investing in themselves first,
Right.
right? Learning the essential things that we're talking about here, all right? And then owning their markets. Because after that, again, if you understand the mechanisms and the things that allow you to generate leads consistently to the right people, think about all the problems that solves in your business and how many things you're not going to do, all the strategies you're not going to use,
Right.
because you've solved that problem. And,
Right.
another really fair example of this is, we work with some really big contractors. And when we start to get into this and unravel their problems and really look inside their business under the hood, what we almost always find is originally it was a marketing problem. It wasn't a sales problem. They could sell.
Right.
They were good at that. They didn't get to that size, but they had a big time marketing problem. And here's a good example of where that shows up. Let's say you've grown your business, right? Now you've got $15 million. You're doing all of this work. You don't know how to say no. Where do you think that comes from? Where do you think that comes from? It comes from scarcity, not having enough work.
Right.
Why don't you have
Right.
enough work? Because you never learned to market. Right. So again, when we start to really trace where these problems come from, and now this company's blown up $15 million, but they're out of control and chaos, and they're trying to be
Right.
everything to everyone because they never learned to say no. Right. And they never learned to say no because they never had the opportunities, or they never had enough there for them to be able to do that.
Yeah.
Make sense?
It does. So you are in school, SKOOL, every week, every Thursday at 3:00.
Correct.
And like we're talking about hiring and marketing, right? I mean, we're talking about this in school every week.
That's all we talk about. And we
So
give you the real, like, step by step, you come with your problem and we'll sort out a strategy for you. As long as you're willing to follow the steps, if it's marketing, if it's hiring, if it's operations, I mean, that's the place to come and get your questions and to put together a strategy that's going to help your business move forward.
yeah, so if you're listening or you're watching us right now and you're like, well, like that all sounds great, guys, but or you're, it's a lot of people don't comment even though they're watching and stuff. That's all that's good. That's all good. If you want to, like, if you have a problem here, or you think you have a problem, or you think there's you want to fix some things or make it better, Thursdays at 3:00, you can come
Yep.
and
Or book a call.
hang out with Jay. Yeah, or book a call with Jay. And and we've got a lot of really interesting solutions for these problems, as you can tell.
Right.
So, all right. Well, thanks everybody for being with us. We're here every Friday, 3:00 Eastern time. Jay is in school where he's helping guys and ladies like you with problems around marketing, hiring, etc. Every Thursday at 3:00. So check us out in school. Come, send a message or just show up. And then, like I said, we're here every Friday, 3:00, bringing the best stuff we've got to help you crush, dominate, grow, get more profitable, and build the business of your dreams. So thanks everybody for being with us, and we'll see you again next week.